Hello, everyone. I'm Bailey Singletary, and I am going to be presenting the AMLE standards project that I have made. This reflects all of the standards that I have learned throughout this course that are provided and are guidelines through AMLE. Um, let's hop right into it. All right. So, standard one is middle level philosophy and school organization. So, a general overview of this standard is that middle school educators should foster equitable educational practices to enhance learning for all students. This can be done by actively applying philosophical foundations and developmentally responsive middle level programs in schools. The quote that I put um, with this standard is it does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop by Confucius. So I like this quote in relation to middle school level philosophy because it indeed takes time for teachers to incorporate their own philosophies in a middle school classroom setting. Um, and it takes time for teachers to develop a relationship with their students and to address their needs. And once these are accomplished, teachers can then expand their attention to what they want to focus on via the curriculum. So the goal is to never give up on the gradual progression of teacher-student relationships as the school year progresses. So how this standard prepares middle-level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents. So this standard is beneficial for middle-level candidates because it brings a focus of philosophy back onto the students. So the main thing that middle school teachers need to focus on and constantly be aware of is how to create a positive learning environment. So this includes addressing student safety, wellness, and learning styles. The two connections that I made to this standard, the first connection was actually a YouTube video titled AMLE Components of the Middle School Philosophy. And one point that I pulled from this video was from John Arnold. So he argues that there are four main parts of implementation of the middle school philosophy. So these are who, what, and how to structure the school. And the second connection is AMLE article of developmental characteristics of young adolescents. It's a research summary. So it says schools play a key role in providing young adolescents with educational programs that promote freedom and independence within a safe space. That's really what I pulled from or connected to this. It pinpoints the important role that middle schools play in adolescent development. All right, moving on to standard two, the young adolescent development. So the overview. Middle level educators should understand and reflect on the major concepts, principles, theories, and research related to young adolescent development and use that knowledge in their practice. They should be able to create healthy, respectful, safe, inclusive, equitable, supportive, and challenging learning environments for every young adolescent they teach. The quote that I associated with this standard states, "Our diversity is our strength. What a dull and pointless life it would be if everyone was the same." This is a quote by Angelina Jolie. So diversity to me is a founding principle of the education field, right? Because student learning differences are what makes a school great and what fosters that welcoming environment all around. So all the teachers, counselors, principals, administrators, they all play a vital part in running a school successfully. Diversity is it's beautiful, and diversity is essential. So how this standard prepares middle level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents. So middle school educators should continuously educate themselves on new concepts and research related to middle schoolers. This in turn helps educators create a healthy, equitable, supportive, and challenging learning environment for young adolescents. The two connections that I made to this standard, the first one is an article by Katrina Schwartz titled How Schools Build a Positive Culture Through Adversary. Adversary periods are a great way for middle school educators to connect deeper with their students outside of academics, so they learn the differences between them and their classmates, and how to value those. And they will typically learn ways to experience not only academic success, but social success as well. So, a quote from there is, while the conversation might touch on how to manage time or stress related to schoolwork, it does not have to be about academics. Instead, this time allows for students to let their shoulders down, get to know their teachers in a different way, and have the space to ask for help. The second connection I made um, was to a Vimeo video made by the BSD2 Community Relations. Um, so this video covers the importance of teams and how it truly helps to build students' confidence in middle school regarding school content and the ins and outs of this challenging time in their life. All right, standard 3. This is for middle level curriculum. So the overview is that middle level teachers use their knowledge of the distinct nature and identities of young adolescents when planning and implementing curriculum and instruction. They understand and use concepts, standards, and research to design, implement, and elevate curriculum. They should also assist adolescents in understanding the interdisciplinary nature of knowledge and skills. So, the quote that I associated with this standard is, education is hanging around until you've caught on. This is a quote by Robert Frost. So, education curriculum and education in general, for that matter, is continuously developing. So, yes, curriculum and standards may change over time, but a teacher's implementation of content should stay steady in encouraging student persistence, student confidence, and the interest in their education. So, it is a gradual progression of this. So, how the standard prepares middle level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents. This standard prepares middle level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents in that it puts emphasis on the importance of teachers being knowledgeable of the content area standards that they teach, along with continuously implementing effective assessment strategies that pique students' interest. My first connection that I made was in Oliver Sakat's TED Talk, The Real Experts of Education Reform. With his argument um, that what makes education hard is that it is dynamic by nature and that it's dependent on constantly changing human interactions. So, education curriculum is ever changing and strives for best practice in every aspect. So, this connects to middle level educators specifically in that they strive to use their knowledge of their distinct nature and identities of young adolescents when planning and implementing middle level curriculum and when selecting and using instructional strategies. The second connection I made was in the William and Mary School of Education blog post, The Importance of Curriculum Development and Enhancing Teaching and Learning. So this states, so curriculum development is an ongoing, dynamic process with a focus on the individual student's success and a scope broad enough to accommodate progress in basic science and technology, as well as changes in culture, politics, and the environment. So this kind of goes on and on. But the main point here is that teachers see firsthand the differing amounts of student needs and how they can adjust their curriculum to meet that. All right, moving right along to standard number 4, middle level instruction and assessment. So this is the overview. Middle level teachers use their knowledge of instruction to apply various methods of assessment strategies. They will develop and administer formal and informal assessments that are both summative and formative to create and guide meaningful learning experiences. Um, this is the quote that I found that I actually think is kind of funny, but really true, and I think it truly connects with this standard. So it states, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guest tastes the soup, that's summative. And this is a quote by Robert Stake. I like this quote because it deals with restaurant food comparisons, so it is bringing in a different aspect, different outlook. But this is just the last thing one would think about when it comes to formative and summative assessments. So this kind of brings a little bit of humor into the aspect, but it's very true, though, because formative assessments for the teacher to evaluate where their students are, which is the cook tasting the soup, and then the summative assessments are to assess where students are at with the content. So that would be the guest tasting the soup. It just really puts it into a good perspective here. So this standard prepares middle level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents, um, in that they need to be knowledgeable in the content that they teach. And this in turn encourages their students' cognitive exploration, creativity, and relevant digital literacy and information literacy skills. And these type of things include critical thinking, problem solving, evaluation of information gained, and much, much more. So the first connection I made was an educational article titled "The Standards Movement in American Education." Um, it just really points out the importance of standards and provides a guideline for teachers to teach by. And it really sets the tone of how standards actually set the foundation of teaching, but ultimately it's up to teachers to decide how the instruction is delivered. My second connection is also another research article. If you can't tell, I really like those, on Utopia, titled "How to Set Up Formative Assessments for Summative Success." This is written by Patrick Brown and Grace Bersoma. I liked this article because it compares formative assessments to training for a marathon. Um, And they state, by framing formative assessments as a necessary training for summative success, we highlight their value not as isolated activities, but as an integral part of a larger process. Just as a runner's race day performance might be influenced by unpredictable factors, students can have off days. However, a consistent misalignment is a trigger for reflection and worth exploring more deeply. This mindset shifts the narrative from simply measuring performance to actively fostering growth, both in running and in the classroom. So I really liked that connection. And last but not least, standard number 5 is middle level professional roles. So an overview is that middle level teachers have various roles as professionals and serve as informed advocates for all young adolescents. They engage with families and community members to form collaborative relationships. Further, they engage in ethical professional behaviors. The quote that I paired with the standard states, "Professionalism is a state of mind, not a paycheck." This is a quote by Cecile Castle. So, even though this project centers around education, this quote can be applied anywhere and in any profession. So, professionalism is and should be a huge part of every job field. With the education profession, professionalism is not just seen in how teachers dress and present themselves, but it's also present in how teachers communicate with others, including their team members and students. Um, so, professionalism is a goal and standard that all educators should put at the forefront of their educational practice. Um, so, this standard prepares middle level candidates to meet the needs of young adolescents, and that teachers are informed advocates for students and use their professional leadership responsibilities to create equitable and just opportunities for all young adolescents. My first connection to the standard is Emma Bright's article titled The Teacher Dress Code: What Every Educator Needs to Know About Professional Appearance Standards. This article makes some pretty valid points about why teachers should dress um, professionally. Um, she, in the article, brings up that teacher attire positively influences student behavior and increases academic engagement. Um, and also notes that appropriate appearance standards help maintain classroom environments conducive to learning by reinforcing the seriousness of the educational setting. Um, Students are looking up to their teachers um, and need their professionalism so that they understand that education is serious. It should be taken seriously. It is the driving factor in the future, for their future. So it is important for us as teachers to be great role models for them. The second connection I made was Dr. Stephanie Knight Hayes' article, The 5 Ps of Professionalism in Education. This provides some valid points as to how to continuously practice professionalism in the teaching profession. So these are the 5 steps. Be participative, be positively particular, plea and be prepared, be punctual, be present, and present yourself. I like to have a good list, especially when it has guidelines and steps for everything. This is just extremely helpful for me. So hopefully these tips will be a good resource for me to refer back to um, professionalism as I step into my new role as a 6th grade teacher. All right, everyone. Well, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for taking your time to take a listen, and I hope you have a great rest of the summer before school starts. Thank you.